Screenless. The TV drama is imagined. The work and the guests are real. Making a soundtrack.
Opening scene and action!
So that means we are having a Christmas break. Do you see? Do you get it?
Yeah,
You get it?
I got it.
Break. Yeah. Yeah, we are going to take a little break so we can relax over the holiday.
Drink a little wine, make a little love.
Drink a little wine, have a mince pie or two.
Yeah. The odd cocktail, yeah. And then maybe in the evening, when it's night time, we will get down. Down from where? I don't know, but we'll be getting down.
Yeah. So yes, we are going to have a Christmas break. We are going to be back on, let's see, January the 10th.
January the 10th, yeah.
So it gives us a nice little break and a chance to kind of catch up with things. So in this episode, we are having a look at track 9 again.
We are, yep. My doodles.
Your doodle-doodles. And we are going to be chatting with fellow composer, Ian Arber.
We are indeed, yes.
Who most recently co-composed the soundtrack to The Capture.
He did,
which was a fabulous BBC drama, which was part exciting, part terrifying, with all the CCTV malarkey that can go on. So, without any more ado...
Is it carol time?
Is it time to...
Cue the music?
Cue the music.
Cue the music.
Track 9, part 2.
Track 9.
We're still on the event.
We are.
Last time I was looking at the strings, which I did, and then I've fired them over to you to albumify the sound of the track.
Yes. I'll be honest, I did struggle with it. I thought it was going to be easier than it was. It's almost the reverse of how I normally work. So normally what I would do is, it's quite an action-y cue. There's a lot going on. What I would normally do is sort of piano roll it out very loosely to picture if I was doing this, usually using one or two pianos, and then go in and start building from the kind of bass upwards. But obviously you'd done a lot of that already, so it was sounding quite big and quite full. And so it came down to, well, where can I, enhance stuff, or is there anything missing from this bit, and kind of do it that way. So I struggled with it for a while, and I probably spent about half a day trying ideas and it failing miserably and not liking any of it before I finally sort of settled into it. So synth-wise, it's done, but I still want to do more because I think it needs more percussion.
Yes, definitely.
The Cat synth obviously featured quite heavily in this, the Korg Monopoly, which we've used before as well, and I did have a little go at a little bit of percussion stuff with SH101, just these little filtered sort of hi-hat things.
Is that the panning from right to left?
Yeah.
Kind of vice versa?
Yeah. And then the Monopoly was just doing arpeggios, so that I just used the arpeggiator on that.
That sounds awesome, by the way.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's got the Monopoly's brilliant because it has this really weird effects section, which is not effects like you think, or delay and chorus or whatever. It's basically a modulation matrix, so you can sort of feed bits back on itself and stuff, which is really cool. So it's got some of that on it, but it's got, hence the name Monopoly. You can have it set up to have all four oscillators in unison, or you can have it set up so that you can play 4-note chords. And if you have it set up like that and then use the arpeggiator, it actually cycles through the different oscillators one after the other. So you can then turn them off or adjust the pitch of them and stuff, so you can get some really interesting stuff. So that's what I did with that.
You've used that before as well on another track.
Yes, I have, which is why I thought it was okay to use it again.
Yes, good tie-in. When you introduce them, it's about 48 seconds, he said, being pedantic. But it really works there because it feels like it's stepping up.
Yeah, that was the idea. And I really want to add, like I say, some more percussive stuff. So I want to add some fairly hot, kind of distorted drums, but filtered so that they're not too, that kind of low mids frequency stuff that can just sit underneath in a couple of places. But I haven't got that quite right. It's a very specific sound I'm after, so I need to spend a bit of time.
That's cool. Well, yeah. I mean, I think it's in really good shape. You're in the right direction. It's just finishing it off, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a big one, so it needs the time spent on it to make it right. Rather than I don't think it's some of the earlier cues. There's a lot less instrumentation to them, and those were easier to do because there's just literally less to do. With this, I think there's a lot to do, but the audio spectrum's already quite full, so it's about finding the right things. So there's a little bit of trial and error.
But also in there, you've got all the individual audio tracks. If you need to take something out to put something in, then, fill your boots.
Yeah, I was thinking, at one point, I was even thinking of doing some funky sort of filter sweeps or chops and stuff on the actual strings and things as well. Ah. So, I'll see. I'll see whether any of that works or not. It might not. It's all these things, they sound great in your head, but then sometimes when you actually get round to doing it, it's like, oof, no.
Yeah, if you could just work on that, have it done by maybe Boxing Day, that'd be fantastic.
No. Well, I don't think I've got anything planned.
That's great.
No. Christmas is cancelled. The kids are getting cold.
No, that's cool. And then after that, we have obviously track 10 and the theme tune, which I'm hoping to visit you once more. So we can actually have a crack at that together.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that'll be early January. So all coming together.
Yeah, very nice.
Excellent. Shall we go behind the scenes?
Let's go behind the scenes.
Okay.
Ian Arber is a film and television composer known for his work on the BBC Proms theme, BBC One thriller The Capture, Netflix series Medici, BBC Two comedy Quacks, My Name is Lenny, starring John Hurt, award-winning documentaries on Bros After the Screaming Stops and Usain Bolt I Am Bolt, and Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. Ian is an emerging talent in the film and music world, with a growing portfolio of work across a variety of genres. Ian is bringing a fresh and unique compositional style to each project. Ian Arber, welcome to the Making a Soundtrack podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for being here.
Welcome.
So, when did you first want to become a composer and how did you get your first job?
Oh, gosh. Okay. So I guess I've been aware of music in film for a long time, from a very young age, but I've never really... I remember even in my teens, I was always the film music guy of all my friends. I was obsessed with John Williams, Steven Spielberg, Bernard Herrmann, and Hitchcock. But I didn't really fully understand or realize it was a possible way of earning money. I always loved film music, but I was always kind of recording local bands and producing, and I saw that as more of a potential career in my teens. So it wasn't until university that I really decided to become a film composer, because I studied music production at university, and one of our modules was film scoring. Actually, my teacher was Jonathan Vincent. I don't know if you know him, really great composer.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, still see him very often at the composing events. But yeah, we had a talk, I think it was in my first or second year at university, with David Arnold, and he came and talked about his scores for Bond and Independence Day and whatnot. I literally had a light bulb moment while he was talking when I realised you could write music for film and television and earn money. And I think mine was quite an interesting realisation, because a lot of people say they wanted to be a film composer since they were 10 or whatever, and they did everything possible. I didn't realise until I was 18, 19 that really it was I could actually do that as a career. So I focused on production, music production, recording, and kind of decided originally that I wanted to go into a studio and be an assistant and then eventually a recording engineer or a producer. So I guess that David Arnold talk it was the moment when I said, I'm just going to put all my focus in. I've got 3 years at university. I might as well spend all my time meeting short filmmakers and start writing more film score music with a view to doing this professionally. Obviously, having studied music production and recorded a lot of bands and musicians in my teens, that ended up being a super useful kind of early learning before becoming a film composer.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because it was a similar path for me. It was quite late on for me, but yeah, there are loads and loads of production stuff first, which I think is a real bonus. If you can go into this with a solid understanding of how to put things together, it means that all of your stuff. It's like when I first started getting into this, and Sam was working for George Fenton. I said to Sam, "Oh, could you perhaps give my show reel to George? I'd love a little bit of feedback." The feedback that came back was, composition-wise, it was okay, but I should be producing everything that Sam makes. So, even then, it was kind of, obviously my stuff sounded a little bit different, a little bit more polished than everyone else's, which was because I'd spent so long recording bands and doing all that. Yeah, like you.
That's it. And also, even if you look at the big boys in Hollywood, obviously not going to say any names, but there are certain guys who clearly are absolute geniuses in writing these massive, really densely orchestrated melodic pieces and scores. But it's not all about that. And a lot of the guys there who aren't necessarily writing, big symphonic scores with, big John Williams motifs, but it is all about the production. And these are like artist records. It's not really like film scoring used to be. They're super polished pop records that sound so well produced. And how often do you actually get a chance to actually write a score which is just orchestra? You're always gonna, 9 times out of 10, there's going to be some sort of electronic edge in film and television at the moment. So that's why production, it has to be produced so well to mix these two elements together, especially when you can't record live strings. Live orchestra.
I think sometimes there's a downside as well. Like, for example, on things like the Sarah Jane Adventures, when they do the international versions of stuff, I'd get asked to do not covers, but a version of a song, something similar to this song that could go on the international one instead. And there'd be some amazingly produced pop tune or something, and you had to then do something that sounded as good as this pop thing. And these people had spent, I don't know, 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, 12 months maybe honing this one single, and
which is also like the pinnacle of their life. That's like their best song ever.
This is what they do. And they've channeled everything into it, and this is something that gets tagged onto, and you have to then just conjure something up.
But also, as part of the temp track, then becomes emotionally attached. So, they're going to be kind of subconsciously associating that production value.
Yeah, it's kind of a subject we can't really avoid, I think, as film composers and television composers, media composers, is obviously temp music. The recreation and sound alikes of songs, like I hate that now. I used to love it, and it used to be part of my kind of pitch to, especially on lower budget things where you knew they couldn't afford the songs. I'd be like, oh, it's fine, you can't afford the songs, I'll recreate that song and this song, it's all good, I'll just do it part of the score. And even if I think then it ends up being an actual score cue, it does end up being, it needs to be as close as possible to that song, and you end up doing it, and then that's the one thing that you regret on the whole thing. You love your score, but why the hell did I try and recreate that Marilyn Manson track? It was a bad idea. And that's an actual example.
Very legally dicey nowadays, isn't it? Going down that route.
Yeah, exactly. So no, I hate that. But the temp music side of it is a whole other thing. But again, it's also relevant because a lot of the temp that I tend to hear tends to be Hans Zimmer and a lot of the one or two kind of massive names in Hollywood. And again, those tracks are produced to such a high level with different sections of the orchestra is recorded to the highest possible recording spec at the best studio in the world, and then you have to use your samples to try and sound similar to it.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think we could probably do a whole podcast on the pros and cons of temp music.
Yeah, and obviously there are pros, and that's the thing. It's such an easy thing to say. Ideally we don't have any temp music, which is true, but at some stage the temp music has to be there, especially that the higher the budget thing, the more likely you're going to need temp music, not only It might be that they haven't hired a composer yet, which just can be annoying, but they just need to edit, not necessarily edit with temp, but they need to show people the episode or the film with music there. And if the composer isn't quick enough to, at the same time, big Hollywood movies, they quite an early stage start testing the film.
Yeah.
And the composer could be on board for a year, but you haven't recorded anything. So if you are happy to never hear temp and then be the guy that writes and uses your sample mock-ups for Mission Impossible or whatever it is, which then goes in the screening, and then people then go, actually, the score sounds weird, because they don't understand the difference between samples and a real orchestra, and then you get sacked.
Yeah.
So there are pros and cons, but sorry, I'm going on to your other podcast now about the pros and cons of temp music. So.
I mean,
It's okay.
the other thing is that it can be a useful shorthand. Sometimes communication can be difficult with a director or a producer, but actually, if they've put a piece of music and they go, actually, I think this really works. There's something about the tone of this music that really works. That's a quicker way.
Yeah.
Rather than sitting there and desperately trying to talk it through and them not getting their point across.
Yes.
Yeah, well, the thing is always a shame for me when directors or producers hire composers. Even though when you get to that stage of the conversation, it's great because you have a piece of music that you can demonstrate what you want. But what excites me would be to hire one of you guys or anyone and just to hear what their natural kind of response would be musically to a film or a script or whatever it is, whatever gets the juices flowing. That's exciting to me. And if that's wrong, that's a benefit because what's not right. But it could be that it's spot on and it's not what the director imagined, but it's the composer who hires voice.
Yeah.
And that is worth pursuing before getting to that point.
Those are always the scores that you're happiest with, I think. I've done stuff before where I've scored a scene and the director comes in and it plays and they're like, okay, I'm a bit lost for words actually. And it's like, what have I done wrong? And they're like, no, it's just totally the absolute opposite of what I just wasn't expecting that at all. It's perfect,
Exactly.
And those moments are just wonderful, and it's always the stuff that you're most proud of.
Yeah, and that's another reason why I quite enjoy pitching, because I've had to pitch for so many things over my career, and there's been so 90% of stuff that I haven't got, maybe even 95% of stuff that I didn't get. But those pitches are always that magic moment where you just have that inspiration, 24 hours, 48 hours, and it's just your response to a video or to a script or the story without any sort of input, maybe a rough brief or a rough idea. But that's I love that phase. And when you come in on a movie with 2 weeks to go and the whole 125-minute movie is temped with 124 minutes of massive music, it's just like, what can I do?
Yeah. So, Ian, we're obviously making an Imagine TV drama soundtrack, Dan and I.
Mm-hmm.
So there seems to be, I've noticed a kind of movement that is kind of anti-music in TV drama. They feel it kind of gets in the way of the dialogue or the storytelling in some way. I was wondering what role you think that music has in a TV drama on the storytelling side.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think what
function do you think it should provide to the overall production?
I think it's clearly essential. There's certainly a difference between television and film, and I think in a strange way, I know as you're saying how things are changing for the bad in some sense, that's coming down to, I think, a lot of the post-production elements where people start to worry about, the dialogue being clear and having to put the music down. But at the creative stage, if you're working with a great director on a television series, and I mean, I haven't done that many, but the two kind of BBC series that I've done, either the showrunner, writer, exec producer, or the director have been so into music. They see the role of music in drama as essential, the same way of making a feature film where you have, both the cases I worked with them, they wanted motifs to represent characters. It was essential that the music diverted, like The Capture, to use that as an example. It's a complete mystery and no one really knows who's good or bad. And the music plays a big part in pushing people, manipulating, I don't really like using that word, but we are manipulating people to think that this guy might be bad when he's actually good, or is he? and vice versa. And, there was a kind of a bad guy within the capture, which was, I just did in quotation marks for a podcast. So a bad guy in quotation marks, being kind of a government organization or an element of this organization of what they do, but it's not a specific person. So we needed to have a specific sound to represent them, essentially a motif. So I totally get what you're saying in terms of where, for me, the worst part is when you go through all of that with a director, such detail, big melodies, and then it gets to the stage when a corporation then say the dialogue needs to be clearer, push the sound down, push the sound design down, or maybe we should have a function where someone can mute the soundtrack.
Yeah.
You might as well have a function where you say, let's lose this character, because it's a piece of art and the music needs to go with the cinematography and the dialogue and the story. And, scores in television just as much as film are part of the storytelling.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily the same story. Well, it's all the same story, but it could be doing something different than the dialogue can't do or the visuals can't do. The score is so essential to that art form. And also at the same time, budgets and creativity in televisions, a lot of people won't argue that it's kind of better than film at the moment. There's more exciting things coming out of television series than there are in film. And back in the day, even not that long ago, 10, 20 years ago, television wasn't as high quality as it is now. And I think they were maybe dumbing down scores a little bit more on purpose. These days, it is much more artistic. They need to have film scores. We're having live orchestras perform TV scores now, which was so much rarer back in the day.
I agree 100% with what you just said. And I think people's nervousness about the dialogue and everything, I think it's about getting it right, getting that balance right as well, isn't it? I'm sure in some dramas you might find that the music might be a bit loud, or it might be that's a mixing thing. That's not necessarily the music you've come up with.
Yeah, I've actually been in a dub where that very thing has happened, where the music's really loud, it's really swelling and going for it, and someone said, well, what about the dialogue? And the producer said, you don't need the dialogue at this point. We know what's going on. You don't need that. What you need that power and that emotion from that music.
That's a really interesting point. And that exactly I flashed up a scene from Interstellar when you said that, because a lot of people complained. I don't know if you remember when Interstellar came out, everyone went to the IMAX, and a lot of people complained about not hearing dialogue in certain moments. And for me, it was so obvious that the dialogue was not essential at all to the specific scene. I can't remember exactly what scene it is, but there's a really climatic scene. Maybe it's when they're docking, and then it becomes so claustrophobic, and you can the music becomes so loud that it's the music rather than the sound design, the sound effects, that drown out the dialogue.
Yeah.
And it's like one of my favourite moments in the movie. Yeah. And then a lot of people come out, the music's too loud. And I remember writing a little comment saying, like, it's not about that, blah, blah, and a little rant, and then Hans Zimmer liked it. And I was like,
he knows, yeah.
He knows what they were doing.
Nice one.
Well, you mentioned the capture, so let's briefly talk about that. Recently co-scored that with Dave Roundtree.
Yeah.
And we've done because we are collaborating, we've done a few bits about collaborating. How did you go about working with that with another composer?
Yeah, okay. Well, I probably linking this into what you asked earlier, actually, partly about temp and the process with Dave. I mean, me and Dave have worked together since 2015 on a few different projects. We did a little Mo Farah documentary back in the day, and then we did the Bros documentary, which came out last Christmas, but we did that like 2 years ago. Yeah. So we kind of dabbled and worked together, and I think the fundamental thing with us two is we really like each other and get on. And we're quite different characters, but we're good friends. So that was a good starting point, because we just know we just love working with each other, because that was just so important to really be friends, I think, in that scenario, which I'm sure you guys get as well.
Well, we hate each other really, but, put on a brave face.
Yeah. That happens too, I'm kidding. When you work with a director you hate, you have to put on a brave face. So for the capture, because me and Dave, when we got the gig, this is Ben Shannon, a lot of respect for him, the director. He's brilliant and he loves music. But for the capture, they used some temp here and there, but their main issue was they didn't know what the music needed to be. And maybe that was a blessing for us, that it wasn't obvious that it needed to sound like Jason Bourne or needed to sound like Gone Girl or whatever. They really had no idea, and they were dropping in bits of temp to try and work it out. But their kind of pitch to us initially was like, we don't know what the... Can I swear?
Oh, I can beat.
Yeah.
We don't know what the f*** is going on in this. We don't know what we want to do for the score. We don't know... They were panicking about it. So when we came on board, me and Dave, basically after talking to the director, like came to the conclusion that the best idea would be just to write some music, write some suites of music to the scenes, but not necessarily to the action. Just 3 or 4 minute suites of music of what we think is what they need. And we knew that there needed to be kind of a hybrid between electronics and orchestral, in that he wanted strings, he wanted melodies, but he also wanted like quite modern and futuristic sounding electronics. So that's why me and Dave got the gig, because that was our pitch. That's how we worked together, and I'll explain a little bit about that in a bit. But this is why that was such a refreshing process. And I think it was probably the most ideal way that you can hire a film composer on a film or television, in that we came in, had plenty of scenes and scripts. None of it was temped. And me and Dave just got together and wrote how we like to write with each other. 3 or 4 minute suites. We wrote like probably 6 or 7, sent them to the director. He said, I love these. These 3 feel a little bit too electronic or a little bit too melodic or whatever. And then we ran with it and wrote 6 more within a few days, and then sent them to him. And he's like, these ones are great. We've just been temping this in episode 1 and it's working really great for this whole sequence. And then he'll send us sequences that he's used our temp music in to show which ones are working best. And then we get the, soft locks of episodes 1, 2, and 3. And 90% of the episodes are temped with the music we've just been writing, the suites we've just been writing. And we're like, this is amazing. Such a good way to work. Yeah. The edit is evolving with the music that we've written, including the pitch tracks we wrote for it. And the director's going out of his way to make sure that he's using the music that we're doing, because he realizes that you can't temp it. And it needs to be a really unique combination and tone and sound. And by the time we got to episode 6, just every single episode had been temped with the different themes for different characters, and he'd taken the stems out and used it a specific way, and we're like, that's genius, he's put 2 cues together, we should give him a composer credit.
That's brilliant.
So that just kind of connecting that into what you were saying earlier, because that was probably I don't think I've ever had such a good process from being on board to, just the whole of the capture from start to finish was a dream, even though at the time, towards the end we were delivering an episode a week. Yeah. But knowing that episode was coming, once it was locked, it had pretty much all of our music temped in there anyway. It was so much easier, rather than it just being full of Trent Reznor or Hans Zimmer, and then having to then convince them why time isn't working in that scene and it should be the theme for the show or whatever. But in terms of me and Dave, I can't even remember what the question was. How does it work?
Yeah, pretty much.
Collaboration.
How does it work?
Yeah, so we'd dabbled on a couple of projects together. We had a great time in the Bros documentary. Like, that was just so much fun, and we were filling in the gaps. We were kind of representing the emotional side of the documentary. It's a very emotional doc, and the more inspirational moments, and probably trying to help make it funnier with really inspiring music and funny moments. But on the capture kind of was our chance to really show off our duo collaboration, I suppose, because we knew Dave's an expert at electronics, obviously percussion as well, but he has all of these. He has like a rack of analog synths, and they all sound incredible. I'm not. I love synths, but I'm not. I would never say I was an analog synth virtuoso or anything. But see, my background's more melody-driven orchestral stuff. I love the orchestra, I love melodies, I love strings and piano. So just because of how different we are, if we then know we have a product that's electronics and big melodies with strings and piano, it was a kind of a dream for us to say, look, this is what we can do. And that's why it was so great to then come on board and be putting these suites together, because we could just do what we love writing together. So it worked really well. Me and Dave work on every single cue together. It was never a case of you do one M1, I do one M2. Yeah. we would go at it together. Dave might come up with an idea, not necessarily just on electronics. If I was writing a piano theme and then I had an electronic kind of undertow, I probably would just use a crappy synth to give the idea, and then I'd send it to Dave, and then he'd put it through his machines and change it, and it comes out like raw and analog, and it sounds bloody amazing. So we both kind of, he does piano stuff and string stuff as well, so we both can do everything, but we know what our skill sets are, we know what our expertise is. So I just knew that if I had anything that I sent to Dave, he would then make the electronics sound super raw and original, because that's what his background is. So it was really kind of it's a dream collaboration. I love working with him. He's a lovely guy, very chilled and brilliant at electronics, and he understands filmmaking, and that's another thing that I guess can be quite rare for artists and people who have been in bands for a long time to then suddenly come into filmmaking. And often they say he needs to then go and work with a film composer, but that's the thing that surprised me about Dave is he can score things on his own right. He understands storytelling. You can't write a score without understanding what we need to put across to the viewer, and the music is a part of that. And yes, you could, I suppose, write an album, kind of a library-esque album worth of themes for someone to then edit in, but I don't like working that way, and neither does Dave. And it's very important, I think, to one of these very complicated dramas where you have little pin drops and very important kind of beats within a scene. You need to understand filmmaking and storytelling, but you need to understand what music can do and push it to the limits, to get the most out of every single scene.
It sounds a little similar to the way Gareth and I have worked actually on this album.
I was going to say it sounds quite familiar.
Yeah, you can, and the listeners won't be able to see. You can probably make out a few synths behind me.
Yeah, I've seen your Tinker Tuesdays.
Yes, yeah. So it tends to be that if there's anything particularly synthy based, I have a crack at it. And Gareth has sent me some stuff. In fact, to be fair, Gareth has sent me some stuff and said, you might want to replace that. Feel free.
Yeah,
and
very,
a lot of it,
very similar kind of process, I suppose.
Yeah, and some of it has been, actually, I don't need to replace that. That sounds great. But then there's been other bits where it's like, actually, yeah, I will replace that because I know exactly what to do with that.
Yeah.
But also we're trying to create this kind of continuity and DNA for the album. And so, if we've used Dan's cat synth bass for a track, then we should use it here as well and create that same kind of sound.
Yeah, definitely. And that's not only is it important in terms of the DNA for you both individually, and that's obviously is the same for me and Dave as it is for you guys, and any collaboration. The DNA, it has to have part of the DNA of both people anyway. So you need the voice of both composers. But that's actually really interesting you say about using the same synths and whatnot, because a lot of Dave's synths are not necessarily like the Junos. They're the little boxes, make yourself analog synths, and it is a nightmare to get them to make the same sound again. Especially the amount of hiss and noise that comes out of those things. You have to EQ the hell out of them, and then you go onto another cue and you say, "We've got 20 minutes. They want this cue there." And I'm like, So that was actually quite interesting and new to me. Was a lot of what we had to do on the capture was to actually to repitch and reuse some of the analog stems, because some of those sounds you just couldn't. Even if you take photos of all the settings, you can't.
It's not always the same. No, it's not. I think an essential purchase, if you buy an analog synth, if you buy an old analog synth, the first thing you need to do is you need to realise that at some point it's going to break and you're going to need someone to fix it, because they do. I literally have two being fixed all the time.
Oh, really?
I just have to swap them out, and two of them are being fixed all the time. The other thing is you need to buy Isotope RX, because it will just get rid of any sort of nasty noises that sometimes crop up in these things, and sometimes they are exceptionally hissy, and sometimes it's like the Juno chorus, which I absolutely love, but it's like Kit from Knight Rider. You're not playing anything from it, and you can just hear this.
Yeah, and it all adds to the character, doesn't it? But you want to tame those moments, because sometimes it's, especially when you're leveling up,
There you get to a point and you've got this lovely sort of held string note, and you can just hear something bubbling away underneath. It's just idle, sat there doing nothing, and it's like, no, I really don't need that.
I did a lot of this in the capture, but I love kind of automating EQs as well. Mm-hmm. And I think it's probably a bit of a cheap way of doing an RX splice to take out a frequency, but I do that a lot. Like in those moments where you have that, often it's in the top end, those kind of movements. I'm always automating in and out on the synths and even the string lines sometimes, just to get rid of some of the hiss of the room. So that string line I'm always automating, because sometimes you can hear it go like as I low pass filter out, which isn't necessarily a good thing. But
creates a unique sound. But no, I love collaborating as well. And if I've got an idea which I then send over to Dan, you could just worry, is he going to change it out of all recognition? But I love that. I love the fact that I'm sending some over to Dan. I really look forward to what he's going to do with it. And I think that's the best bit about collaboration, is that you're truly just leaving your ego at the door. You're sharing it all. You're just trying to make the best thing you can make.
Absolutely. And yeah, that's a really good point, ego at the door thing, because we all get that opportunity to have our big egos when we're working on our own things. Yeah. And even that, maybe if you're doing your own library album and you can be full on ego, do your own thing, and then even then you're working on a television show or a film, you're essentially collaborating with another creative, whether it's a composer or a director. Yeah. It's still a collaboration, so you need to, there's always a compromise. And working on your own, it is exciting. I love working with directors and them not knowing much about music, but telling you not necessarily use a kazoo instead of a flute, but make this more whatever blue, make this more raw, make it faster, make it slower. I love that kind of stuff on my own, working on my own projects. But it's just a different thing collaborating, and it's so exciting to then go, look, it is a compromise, but what's exciting is that compromise between the two of us is going to come out with something super original and unique with the DNA of both of us. Yeah. And that is exciting in its own right. And I used to kind of be like, no, I don't know if I'm into that collaborating thing. I'm just going to sit in the box on my own in a room. And it's some of the proudest stuff I've done has been working with other composers.
I think you find stuff out about yourself as well. And I think, well, I'm sure that I will take stuff away from what we're doing here that'll make me better in stuff I'm doing on my own. Absolutely.
Exactly, yeah.
I won't learn anything. Nothing.
Dan knows everything already. So
well, it's kind of messed me up because Dave's so good with those electronics, and I'm purposely, if I do any electronic lines, I'll send him a really terrible, if you knew you were going to an orchestra, you wouldn't necessarily push your production of your samples to the edge. You'd wait until you just write the good music and then get to the orchestra. Yeah. And I did the same with Dave and Simps. But now it's like, if I'm doing something on my own with electronics, I'm like, I could do with Dave just to make these sound good. Because I haven't stretched that muscle so much going into detail, and I haven't got any hardware synths, in my studio. So, but anyway, just always collaborate. It's fine.
Yeah, no.
Absolutely. Well recommended.
So, it's a question we ask all our guests. What advice would you give your younger self or someone wishing to become a composer?
Oh gosh, that's a big question, isn't it? For me, for my younger self, I think one thing I didn't lack, and this is probably advice to younger composers or people wanting to make it in this industry, and you guys, I'm sure, will relate to this, but I was always massively positive. I was the most unpessimistic person on the planet. So that kind of helped me not get down when people weren't replying to my emails or I wasn't winning pitches for things. So I suppose it's that kind of relentless attitude to not give up and keep going. So in terms of how I did it and how I think, where my breaks came from was having relationships with other composers. So that's one thing I often say to younger guys and girls at university or, even younger starting out is, you always have people saying, don't network with composers, don't do this, don't do that. But literally every break and every kind of useful advice I've ever got have been from more established composers than me. And just knowing Joe Kramer is the reason why he hired me to assist him on Mission Impossible. And these things just happen through knowing people. And whether it's, the same way a director or producer might not necessarily listen to your music before they hire you. They look at your credit list or there's a recommendation and then you maybe pitch for it and you get it or you don't. I've got things where I know that, I found out later that they didn't even listen to my music before I was hired on it. It's the same way with composers. It's based on the relationship and whether they like you and if you get on with them. So I'm not endorsing and saying go out there and assist composers, but that is one really great option. And if you want to go the route, I didn't go that route. I went the route of emailing literally, I want to say 1,000, I was going to say hundreds. It probably was high hundreds of emails out every day or every few days to student filmmakers, using crowdfunding sites like Kickstarter and Indiegogo. I'll just email everyone who's just started funding their movie, send them my portfolio, and you get one reply in 100 or something. And eventually you end up going, oh, so a composer approached me to do my film, my first ever short film. And then you end up working with that guy or girl. And then they end up, one of them just needs to go off and have a career. And then they take you along with you.
Yeah.
But so if you go that route of trying to make it yourself and not go the assistant route, it's so helpful and essential to have those more established guys and girls, composers, to talk to and give you advice and probably throw you work here and there. Because if you can get that, it changed my life getting a credit on Mission Impossible. I'd already done, 8 feature films and a couple of documentaries and 25 short films or whatever, and I was earning a bit of money. But as soon as I got a credit on Mission Impossible, suddenly everyone took me so much more seriously.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal, that, isn't it?
Yeah, and even if it was just, T-Boy, having the credit and just being there. And that's another thing. That's probably what... I don't know if I would have given myself that advice, but maybe I would have, because I did those networking trips early-ish in my career. Again, quotation marks around career, because, I did probably 5 years of short films and feature docs, which were almost no budget, so I'd always be pushing for at least some money. And then on the side, worked in television from time to time. You kind of need, I think if you're going to do it your own way, you need to have something else, whether that's doing a bit of sound design to earn a bit of money or teaching on the side. The quickest way to kind of get by that would be to jump in and assist a composer, which has its benefits. But I'm still the guy who's always going to say you're better off developing your voice by doing it your own way and making your own mistakes, scoring your own films, rather than sitting in a room with another composer for 5-6 years and then coming out with no credits to yourself, but loads of great, assistant credit roles. Yeah. I'd always lean towards go at it yourself, and if you can get the odd credit or relationship with some of the bigger guys in LA or in the UK and get the odd credit with them, that is such a massive benefit, because you're going to learn so much from them, so much for being in that room on a Mission Impossible, whatever it is, but also still be doing your own thing and developing your voice. I don't know if is that advice?
It is, and I think it's a very valid point about the positivity, about not giving up, because as soon as you do give up, that's when you've missed out. And even if it takes 10 years and you are having to do other stuff as well, I think one thing we've touched on is that actually the industry now is not what it used to be, and if you are starting out in this, you do have to have some sort of diversity. So actually that's a really good start from the word go, because if the career takes off, great. You don't need to do quite as much of the teaching or, the orchestrating or whatever it is that you're sound design.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't take off, you've still got those other things and you've got other revenue streams coming in. I think that's really important. And when it comes to contacting people, I think you're right. I think contacting people is great, but it's about starting a relationship. It's not about emailing them or phoning them or stopping them and saying, give me a job. It is literally about, hi, how are you? I'm and just starting a conversation. And I think you find that because of the deadlines and the pressures and everything else, people just want to work with people that they can get on with.
Yeah.
You don't have to be the greatest, most amazing prodigy from some sort of university or whatever. You just need to be really good to get on with, have a great work ethic, and just know your stuff.
And get it,
And get it,
Get what the production's about and things.
And be someone you like to have a pint with.
Well, exactly. Good hint, good hint.
As you said that's literally what I live by now when I meet someone. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that would be the advice I give to myself, because it took me 5 years to realise how you talk to people, whether it's directors, composers you want to work with, or anyone like that. And you just realise now, and for the last 5-6 years, if there's ever been, and with Joe Kramer and some of these guys I know in LA, or even directors and producers, I just will never, ever be the person to say I'm a composer, and I'll never be the person to say, oh, I'd love to work with you.
Yeah.
I would always just focus on getting to know the person. And if it's someone you really admire, and you're like, I know he's doing that film in a few months and he's looking for a composer, I wouldn't be like, oh, so have you got a composer? I'd just be having a conversation with him and wait, because at some point he or she is going to ask you, so what do you do? Or if they know you're a composer, it's like, oh, are you busy at the moment? It'll come from them at some point. And That's one thing I'd always say to myself is early days. When you're emailing people, calling people, it is just about striking a relationship, whether you're going to work with them or not.
It's a fine line, isn't it? Because you obviously, you're doing it for a reason. Of course you are, but at the same time, you don't, this is what I mean. I mean, I get so many emails and stuff where people are like, I do this, I do that, or I've done this and I've done that, and I'd really like to work with you and stuff. And it's like, yeah, well, okay, that's great. And then you write, this is another bugbear of mine. You take the time, because I always take the time to write back. So if people email me, I will always write back. So I write back, I don't have anything at the minute, but there's this, maybe mention Scorecast or whatever, and get on there and do all that, and then you never hear anything. You don't even get a thank you email saying, thanks very much for your time. I really appreciate you getting back to me. You don't get any of that, and it's just like, come on.
I had someone email me the other day saying, I've written this song, I've recorded it, I think it would do well in a TV show or a film. Would you like to hear it? So I wrote back and said, thanks for getting in touch. That's great. I think you might want maybe someone who's not a composer.
Director?
Director or a producer or, someone like that. But, good luck. And they said, oh, okay, would you like to hear it anyway? So I said, yeah, of course, yeah, great. And I still haven't heard back from them.
Well, there you go. But, it's all worth it when you get that one. Like I just had an email last week or the week before, and I responded, as you said, Dan, like, we all we kind of have a responsibility to respond to everyone because people responded to us at the start of our career.
Yeah.
But you always then get that one that comes back and goes, oh my God, thank you so much. I never get a response like that.
Yeah.
Like, I really appreciate it, especially, if you listen to it and the music's like quite good and you're like, actually, this person's quite talented. If you do spend the time and that person comes back and then they've got that relationship with you, but you actually know they're a good person and they're trying really hard and they're going through a hard time. So it's always worth responding, but you're always going to have those people who are just mass emailing a million people with a generic email.
But that raises another good point, which is you just do not know what somebody's going through in their day. And obviously it's a little easier in person to find to see. If somebody's having a bad day, you can usually see, although there are obviously days where we all hide the terrible days that we're having and stuff. But on an email, you don't know. And then you reply to that person and you just give them, it takes you 5 minutes and you do that. That could be the one thing that keeps them going. That could be just that little response. Oh, actually, somebody's responded to me. Just, a little bit of faith in humanity has been restored.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
It's just common courtesy.
In probably one of the most mentally challenging industries as well. But also, it's not a normal industry we're in. It's one of the most mentally exhausting industries you can be in for anyone in the film industry. And I know there are a lot of equivalent industries, acting, but mainly film. I think mainly within film and television, we're all kind of in the same pot. And, Michael Price always says, he thinks it's on average probably about 10 years for someone to make it. And it takes kind of 5 to 10 years of hard graft before you actually get to that point where you're earning money to really be able to live and not be stressing about every little thing and every little thing you don't get. And that part of that 10 years is that kind of mental growth, because it is you can't just getting beaten down and not earning any money and missing out on every single project is not healthy for the most positive person on the planet, never mind someone who does struggle with whatever they struggle with,
Yeah.
Fantastic. And on that note, I think we need to thank Ian for his insights into the TV and film industry and his experiences. Thank you very much, Ian, for joining us. It's been absolutely great.
Pleasure. I hope it was useful. I've just blabbered on for an hour, I think, so apologies.
That's what we're good at.
Oh, perfect. So we had a very nice comment on Tinstagram from previous guest, Steve Hughes. He was talking about last week's episode and said that Jeremy is amazing. Loved working with him on the Casualty 30th anniversary episode. His score was stunning, and watching him conduct a 100-piece orchestra live to the episode at a special screening at the Cardiff Millennium Centre was one of the proudest and most exciting moments of my so-called career. Well, how lovely.
God, he's so modest, isn't he?
He is very modest, yes.
So-called career,
So-called.
honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that must have been amazing.
Yeah, I bet that was absolutely phenomenal. I'd been to a lot of those sort of live things where they have, the movies playing and have an orchestra doing the score along, and they're just phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah, the precision.
Yes, I know. It's another level. It is another level.
Not seen them. 2000s boy band reference. there.
Another level. Yeah, yeah. All amazing
Good.
players. All amazing players, all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So is that a wrap?
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
How do you find us? Makingasoundtrack.com will tell you everything that you need to know. Links to the podcast, social media links, and there's information about us as well.
And if you're enjoying the podcast, it would make our day if you could give us a positive rating or review. And if you enjoyed this episode, hit that share button and recommend it to someone. So we'll see you after our little break in 2020.
Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah. Insert sleigh bells here.
Don't insert them there. That'll be painful.